Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be talking to Shawn, who comes to us from Kansas. And he had a very interesting encounter when he was a little kid. He had actually seen two of these creatures, but he describes finding footprints and a lot of strange things that went on and around the property when he was a little boy. So he'll be talking about some of that tonight. Then I'll also be talking to Jeff. And Jeff is actually just across the Columbia River from me, over on the Oregon side. And he'll be sharing some experiences he had up at Mount Hood. Should be a great show tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, please check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member, get additional shows. A lot of cool things on the site. Friday night, how's everyone doing tonight? Let's jump into it. Shawn, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you for inviting me, Wes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here, Shawn. And I know your encounters took place in Kansas, and a lot of strange things that happened in the beginning. And walking up into your actual encounter, if you would you kind of start from the beginning? What was kind of one of the first things you noticed that you experienced prior to actually seeing it?
Well, the very first thing that I would notice was there would be my bedroom was above the driveway, so above the garage basically, and there was when you walk out the front door to the right and you look over the rail, we had trash cans there, and I would always hear, not always, but sometimes I would hear, something going through our trash can. And I always thought it was raccoons or something, because every time I looked out there or would open the door, I would never see anything out there. From there, during the summer, I'd come outside. I'm a only child, so I'm basically had to entertain myself. And so I came outside and I looked at the flower bed because we had just planted some flowers. So I was excited about, I helped my mom plant some flowers. I wanted to see if they had started coming up. When I went and looked in the flower bed, I saw like footprints in the flower bed. And I was like, why would somebody walk around here with no shoes on and walking, is somebody trying to look in our window at night, or what's going on?
And you're a young kid at this time. You're what, about 12 years old?
Yes, sir.
And live
12 years old.
Just you and your mom?
Just me and my mom. And I would have to say, let me rewind just a little bit. The previous winter, I believe, there was a snow day, and my friend and I were playing, having a snowball fight. We went around his property, throwing snowballs at each other. And when we got around to the back side of his house where his gate was, we entered the backyard. And once we entered the backyard, we saw footprints going through the back of his backyard in the snow. We followed the footprints until we got to the edge of the fence, and we looked at them, and there was a footprint on one side of the fence and a footprint on the other side of the fence. So it basically walked over the fence in stride, I guess.
I realize you're like 12 at the time, but were they large footprints? Did they seem like they could be human in size? Do you remember? Obviously, humans don't walk over fences, but...
Well, it was just bizarre because it was snow on the ground. I mean, it was a snow day, so I would say that the snow that we were out there playing in was probably maybe 2 feet deep.
I gotcha.
And so it was just odd to me and him. His name was David. And, we looked at it and looked at each other and like, who would be walking around barefooted in the snow? And the size of the prints, at the time, I think I might have been wearing a 7 or 8 in shoe size. I could put both of my feet together, and both of my feet together wasn't as big as this 1 foot, or so it was just bizarre. After that, I recalled being sick on the couch, and the way that our front door was made, we had a little glass square glass piece in the front door that was, I guess, about the average adult's height or whatever. And I recall seeing a face, and when I looked up there, I saw a face going past the window. I told my mother that I saw a face in the window, and she didn't believe me. And I guess those were the things leading up to, I guess, me actually seeing it, because when I saw the face in the window, I didn't know if I really saw a face or I saw the trees in the front yard moving to create some type of distorted image or something that I was seeing.
I gotcha. And so this is going on. You're finding footprints. There's obviously something around the home. Are we leading up to when you threw a football?
Yes, I had was outside at night, and I was, how you kind of throw a football up and you practice catching it by yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was launching the ball up in the air and was catching it, and I was in the street, and to my left there was a driveway, and then they had like I wouldn't say it was a full garage. It was just big enough for them to put their car in it, not any lawn tools or lawnmower or anything. And they had a large row of hedge bushes or something like that by the garage that were over, I know they had to be over 5 feet tall because they were taller than me. And when I was throwing the ball, I noticed, because there was a light on the garage, and I noticed something about, I guess you would say, my knee level at the time, peering at me from behind this bush. And when I noticed it ducked back really quickly. And so I was like, I wonder if that's one of the kids in the neighborhood trying to play a prank on me or trying to do something. And so I just kept throwing the ball, and I kept my eyes, like my peripheral vision, kind of facing towards that way, and kept throwing the ball. And then I noticed that it would kind of peek like just enough of his head out where maybe one eye would be where they could see what I was doing. And then if it thought that I was looking in that direction, it would duck back really quickly. And this went on for maybe about 5 minutes or so. At that point, I got frustrated, and I thought to myself, well, this must be one of the kids in the neighborhood. So I threw the football in that direction, and I was a pretty accurate throw. And I wasn't trying to hit it or hit, I thought what was a child, and it hit near the location where it was. And I screamed, "I see you." After I did that, I stood there and I looked for a while, expecting somebody to come from around the bush. "Ha ha, man, we got you," or whatever. That never happened. And after that, I looked for a little bit longer, and I started getting a really strange vibe. And I said, "Let me go in the house. I'm gonna take myself in the house because I don't know what this feeling is." But I went in the house, and so later that night, I felt like, by seeing the footprints and all that other stuff that I had seen, maybe possibly that's what it was. And so I slept close to the window, which was a large window in my room, and the bottom of the window almost came down to the floor. There was probably about a gap of maybe 5 to 10 inches before, it before the floor, I guess. And so I slept in that little gap and fell asleep. And then I woke up and I thought I heard like someone talking or something. And then I noticed like these greenish, yellowish, I don't know if it was reflections. I couldn't really say it was an orb or anything, but it looked like, you know how you used to get those stickers that were they're like silver stickers, but then when you move them in the light, they turn all different kind of colors.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought, you know, maybe that might be something shining off of the neighbor's truck, because we lived in a duplex. So like maybe something is shining off his truck. I didn't really get up to look. Shortly after that, I kind of peered over to my left and I saw it walking up to the window, and I put my head down. I was like, oh man, what is that? And, you know, then I looked up again. By that time, and it had gotten on the right side of the window and walked kind of underneath the window, crouched a little bit. And when I looked down, which would have probably been maybe about a foot or so away from where I was looking, we made eye contact, and the way that the eyes were shifting, like it was analyzing me and really trying to something, I don't know. But the look on its face, I would have to describe as like, if you've ever seen just anybody that's really angry and they scrunch their brows up really like, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
That type of a look. And when it did that, I backed up from the window a little bit, but I was still on the left side of the window looking at it. And then it stood, I guess, all the way up, which it was damn near in my face at that point. And it proceeded to have these little facial gestures that it was doing. I'm not going to say that it was smiling or something, but it did kind of turn its body a little bit, and then it kind of leaned his head back a little bit and kind of cracked his mouth open. At that point, I saw what I thought I saw was canine teeth. They weren't like big like a dog's teeth, but kind of smaller, but they were pointed. And when it did that, I took off and, you know, went to my mother's room and started shaking her. Shortly after that, I want to say maybe even 30 seconds, they were it. I don't know if it was several of them. I believe at this point, I believe there might have been some that were in trees, and that's why I saw the greenish yellow stuff on my light. It might have been eye reflection that was, because there was a floodlight in my neighbor's yard. And anyway, going back to being in my mother's room, it wasn't even 30 seconds or more before I had heard them walking around the back of the house, and I could actually feel the steps through the wall while I was trying to wake my mother up, tell her the first thing I said to her was, there's something out there. And she said, well, you know, there's nothing out there. Don't worry about it. I said, no, there's something out there. You need to call the police. Please call the police. Please call the police. And I wouldn't leave her room. And while I was sitting there begging her, I kept hearing them. It was almost like you could hear them pacing back and forth in front of her window. And then to kind of tie in something else that I thought about after the fact, which is the next door neighbors had two large Doberman pinschers. One of them was like one of the sandy red nose type ones, and one of them was regular with the regular black and brown markings. They had a fence that was set up that wasn't an actual like chain link fence, but like one of the kinds you can just throw up temporarily to, you know, maybe like a garden fence or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so one one day I was out there cutting the grass, and the woman uh, screamed over at me that I need to stop messing with her dogs. I was terrified of those dogs. I would never. I told her I was scared. I'm not coming over there to fool with your dogs. So I think that they were messing with her dogs at night as well. But back to my mother called the police. The police came. There was nothing around there. They came in and talked to my mother and said there's nothing out there. And I'm looking at them like, are you serious?
Yeah. And it's kind of fascinating too at this point because, and one detail I'll fill in for the audience is your mom was actually in a major injury. I mean, she had like a neck brace and probably was pretty heavily sedated at this point because she was in so much pain.
Right, she was sedated. She used to actually at one point in time. My mother was a school teacher, and at one point in time she took off a good part of the school year because she had been in multiple accidents, and was going through the therapy, and how the medical field is. They throw things to kind of patch you up and not really cure you. So they threw some medication her way, and she was sedated, like I said, but I still woke her up. And what's funny about that whole thing is, all my life I've never had to call the police for anything at one of my residences. As a child, we've never called the police. Nothing has ever happened. And like I said, the police came, they said what they said. But before the police came, I went back into my room and I peeked out the window. And when I did that, I heard a large growl, and then I saw a limb in the neighbor's front yard get knocked off. I didn't actually see him knock it off because they were standing in the shadows at this point. And they knocked off the branch and growled. And the growl that I heard, I'll never forget that. I'll never, ever forget it. And the howls that I used to hear when I was getting ready for football practice around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I would come outside and there would be these weird howls. And this was before my incident even happened. I would hear these howls. And I guess the way I can describe the howls would be, it wasn't like whooping at any point. It was like almost like a long siren type howl that kind of gradually changed pitch over time. It didn't kind of really modulate.
Like the Ohio howl? I didn't mean to cut you off. Kind of like the Ohio howl?
I've heard you play that before, and I do believe that it sounds exactly like that. You know the point where in the Ohio howl where it seems like it's reverbing?
Right, yeah. It's kind of going up and down.
That's what I heard. I mean, I heard it like doing it, but it was like it was stopped, but the trail of it was continuing, and then it will start back up and add more to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And people have to realize, too, this is like 1970s, 80s, and so there wasn't a ton of information on these things. I want to go back to a couple things along with the description of it, but before we get into that, you had mentioned it was doing facial expressions with you. And I'm really fascinated by this because I've talked to probably half a dozen kids that have seen this at their window. And you got to be careful how many questions you ask a kid because it starts to feel like an interrogation. But I'm curious, what do you think it was doing? Because I've heard all these kids say this, the facial expressions change. But what do you think it was trying to do?
It was trying to intimidate. I'm not going to say from my standpoint as an adult right now, I believe that it was trying to intimidate me because I threw something at one of its members or a child member that they had or whatever. because like I said, in the front yard, when I first saw footprints, I saw three sets of footprints. There was one that was probably about 18 inches long. There was one that was probably around my foot size. And then there was one that was in between those sizes. And so I believe that it was trying to intimidate me. Now, the actual facial expressions that it made, like I said, the eyes were, when I first saw it up underneath the window, kind of, it was, the eyes were shifting really quickly, like it was scanning me. And then it moved over to the left of the window. And that's when it kind of turned, and I could see its whole head at that point, its face. Looked at the eyes. The eyes to me didn't have, it was like, you know how we have the white in our eye? I didn't see a lot of white in the eye. And the nose, from what I remember, it was very much like a gorilla's nose. It was large and spread out and kind of hooked at the ends of the nose. At that point, it kind of turned its head a little bit, or its body and head a little bit, and proceeded to lean back and show me his mouth. He like kind of opened his mouth, and this look on his face. Have you ever seen like somebody trying to sneak up on somebody, and they get close to him, and the person sees them, and they try to act slick like they're not going to do nothing, and then they actually grab you real quick? That's what I felt was getting ready to go on, and that's why I ran away from the window. It showed me its teeth, and the mouth was really large. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is, and their mouths are huge. You know, when they come in. How would you compare its look different from like a gorilla?
I think the head is way larger than the gorilla's head. The pigment on its skin, the one that was in the window, actually, when I first saw it walking close up the driveway, we didn't have a long driveway, so it probably took maybe 2-3 steps, and it was right up on the window. When I first saw it, I really thought that I was looking at Chewbacca almost. But then when I really saw its face in the window, I thought I was looking at just a giant gorilla. Like, this is crazy, because, you know, you don't expect to see something like that. I'm living in the suburbs at the time. The way that the neighborhood was, it was like we were on the, I feel like we were on the edge of town. So if you drove probably 10 minutes in, you know, a certain direction, you would be, you know, heading out of town.
It really is fascinating because, you know, a lot of things I hear these kids say too, when they get up and they go to their parents' room, these things will run around the house and follow them, which is odd to me. But did you ever see the creature again after this incident?
I did not. I think, really, to be honest with you, shortly after that, I think it affected me so much that it affected my behavior with my mother, and I went to live with my uncle in Denver. And when I got off the plane in Denver, first thing my uncle does is he decides he wants to go cut wood for the fireplace, and we drive up to the mountains, and guess who's having a panic attack?
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you left shortly after this incident.
I started acting out, and I mean, as a child, you don't really know how to take that, seeing something like that. You know, it affected my sleeping pattern for a while. I wasn't able to sleep at night. And then when I was able to sleep at night, I would have very vivid dreams of it busting in the house and, possibly doing something to me. Now, what's interesting, I think, about the next morning, I don't know if I put that in the email that I sent you. When my mother was teaching at a different school, so she would get up and get me prepared in the morning, and then my school was like maybe 2 blocks away. So she had left already. I was going downstairs to the basement to get clothes, and when I did that, when I turned the first flight of steps to go down to the second flight, I heard grunting, and I immediately took off. So I don't know if they were in the bottom part of the basement or they were sitting on the back side of the house at this window, which would have been, we didn't have anybody that lived directly behind us. There was a church, with a large gravel driveway behind the house. But I took off and I beat on the neighbor's door and told him there was something in our house. And he went over and looked, and there was nothing in the house. But, after that, I walked to school and was very aware of my surroundings. And when I got out of school, I really didn't want to have to come back home because I didn't know, if that's something that I'm going to see in the daytime or do they just come out at night? Because at that point, I had, seen the In Search Of stuff back in the 70s with Leonard Nimoy, and, they didn't really have, the only thing they had was the Patty film at the time. And what I saw, it wasn't as bulky as Patty, but it was really tall and kind of very wide at the shoulders, but it didn't seem to be as bulky as Patty was. I didn't get to see a full body shot. I saw from the first moment I saw it, I probably saw from the torso up to its head.
Yeah, I worry about stuff like this, Shawn, because I'm telling you, I've talked to a lot of little kids. Probably some of the best witnesses I've ever talked to were little kids. And there's this weird fascination these creatures have with kids and with women. Do you think that it meant you harm, or do you think it was more of curiosity?
I think at that point it meant me harm. It was, by listening to your show, it's kind of educated me on some of the behaviors that I've heard other people had experiences with. And by me throwing something at them, I think was taken as a sign of aggression on my part. And so they were coming to threaten me, or if they could have got me at that point, they would have gotten me, I believe. If I would have been dumb enough to go outside, you probably wouldn't be talking to me.
Do you think that they'd been watching you for a while? Obviously you were finding prints and...
I do believe that, I'm sorry to cut you off, I do believe that they have been watching me for a while because I always felt watched in the house. The way that my mother had these curtains in the kitchen, and the bottom part of the curtain right in front of the sink, it covered the window, but then there was I don't know what this piece is. It's like a little overhang piece that has material on it, but there was a gap in between the top part of the window and then where the actual curtain starts. And so when would be sitting there or standing there washing dishes, I would always feel like I was being looked at, and it would give me really spooky, just a really odd feeling. One day I went outside my mother had bought a hibachi grill for us to cook on that summer. And I'd opened up the back door to get ready to cook something. And I noticed the tree in the backyard just started shaking really hard. There was nothing by the tree shaking it. So I thought something had ran up in the tree. But the way that it was shaking, it was too heavy for a cat or a possum or some raccoons or some little type of animal like that. It was, I mean, this tree was really shaking hard. So at that point, I had went in the house to try to find a flashlight, and went back out there and looked, and there was nothing in the tree at that point. So I do believe that they were watching me for a while. They could have been watching my mother too as well. I know yesterday when we talked, I had mentioned that, race, and I do believe, what you said, that they don't see race, but I do believe that they do see difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So if I'm walking around and I was the only, I think there might have been 3 black kids in my class at my not junior high, but elementary school. And yeah, so I think they were curious about what they saw. And when I threw that ball, that just kind of took the curiosity away and said, "Oh, we have to send somebody out there to discipline this person, because they can't throw things at us. We only get to throw at them."
Yeah, no, I hear you. I wanted to ask you too, when you saw the face looking at you, I realize you're seeing it from a distance and half of it's hidden by a bush. Do you think it was the same creature that came up to your window that night, or do you think it was a different one?
I know it was a different one because the head was not big. And the matter of fact, I can describe the head to you. Have you ever seen there's a video out on YouTube about some guys in a tent, and they leave their tent kind of cracked open, and I guess they walked away for a while. And there's one of them walks past the tent, and I don't know if that was night vision that they had on the camera or whatever, but you see the shape of the head, and you can kind of see the ears kind of having a point to them or something. But the way I can describe the head was, it was otherworldly as far as looking at it at that point. At the head was kind of a conical shape, but it was more pointed than the one that I saw in my window. And I could see the ears a lot better on this one. And matter of fact, the way I could really describe it is, I thought I was looking at like some kind of fairy or something peeking at me from behind the bushes. It was really, really, really strange. I could see where it was kind of like tilting its head, like it was like analyzing what I was doing. And then, like I said, when it saw me looking that direction, it peeked back behind the bush, and then it kept nudging itself out just a little bit, then it would duck back. And it did that, like I said, maybe about between 3 to 5 minutes. And at that point, that's when I threw the ball at it, and I was like, I've had enough, and I'll see you. Then I went into the house. Got a really strange feeling like that might be what I've been seeing, the footprints around the house.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder too if the neighbors knew something was going on. Obviously, she's yelling at you about her dogs. I mean,
you know what's funny about that is the neighbors I always used to wonder why they didn't have curtains on their windows. They had tint on their windows. It was that mirror tint on their windows.
Oh, like tinfoil. They put up tinfoil.
That it wasn't tinfoil, but it was that tint that you can see through that looks like foil. Yeah. And so I imagine they probably had to see something if I know that they did that because the guy next door worked some type of construction and he had his truck out there. So I guess he wanted to keep an eye on it. So if they were ever in that room, which their place mirrored our side, basically, that would either been a guest room or a TV room or whatever they wanted it to be. I never really went over there to visit them ever, but I'm pretty sure they might have seen something. Now, the people that lived on the left side of me, which was a guy named Charlie, and I believe his wife was Diane, and they had 2 kids. I believe that they saw something because they never said nothing to me, but they moved. And I never knew why they moved because they liked the school system there, and I got along with their kids, and they ended up moving, further out on the Missouri side,
Yeah, it'd be nice to go back in time and ask, somebody else must have seen it, especially if they were tromping around the snow, leaving prints everywhere. Somebody had to have seen them. And I don't think that race really plays. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't think it. I've talked to a lot of African Americans and been growled at and bum rushed as much as know why. So I think Sasquatch is an equal opportunist when it comes to. I don't think they care. But it is a fascinating. When you said that and we hung up, I thought, what, maybe that is it's kind of a touchy subject, but maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
The reason I say it is because I believe that maybe they were curious, like maybe they might be something like, he's looking at me like maybe he might be something like me or something, kind of, The
one that you saw, did it have black skin? It was kind of light pigmentation. The one that I saw in the window. I don't know if I was looking at the female in the window because I never had a chance to see anything that displayed any gender to me. Yeah, and it's fascinating to me. A lot of times in situations like this, because I do talk to a lot of people off the air. There's been so many times where I'll talk to like kids, for instance, and I'll ask them how long it's been going on, and then I'll go back and ask the parents, well, how long has he or she's been saying they're seeing this thing at the window, and the parents will say, well, 6 months. I just thought it was an overactive imagination. And then when they start realizing something's going on here, the parents eventually see it. But it seems like the creatures really have some weird interest with kids, and I don't think it's a good one. Personally,
I don't think it's a good one either, because I think that they are probably trying to coax these kids out to make a nice little meal out of them.
Yeah, you're right, Shawn. You're probably right. I want to ask you, what do you think that these things are, Shawn? What's your honest opinion?
Looking at the face, as close as I was, I mean, the length from my face to its face was, I would say, no more than 2.5 feet, maybe closer. What I believe they might be Gigantopithecus or some type of spinoff of early man or something. But the hair that I saw on it, I didn't see really a lot of hair on the face. It had like maybe some hair on the sides a little bit, like kind of like a beard would be. But the majority of the face was uncovered. I believe that they might be like relatives of those 2 things that I just stated.
Yeah, you could be right. Did your mom, I want to ask you too, did your mom, how long did she stay there after you left?
I want to say she might have been there for another year. I've asked her, did she ever see anything? She claims that she never saw anything. And I always wondered, like, after I left and went to Denver, did she see anything? And is she possibly telling me that to because she doesn't want to admit that she's seen it? I don't know. But I did ask her last night if she would be willing to get on the interview, and she chuckled at me. So that kind of lets me know that I think that she really still does not believe me.
Yeah, and I think that hurts the most, especially when family does, because everyone else is just strangers. But family, you think they would listen to what you have to say, but not always. There's a lot of situations, like I said, a lot of kids I've talked to where their folks just didn't believe them and just flat out didn't believe them. And then eventually, things get ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. And then the parents see it. Maybe the creatures moved on after you left. It's hard to say.
Well, you know what I kind of wonder is the way my mind works now after seeing that and experiencing it. I believe that they, at the house, the old house, um, I believe, there was a railroad, train tracks that went. If I went maybe a little bit more than a football field and a half away from the backyard of the house, there were train tracks there. I believe these things probably jump trains and travel and do different things. And then at one point in time, I believe that they might travel partially through sewer systems.
What makes you say that about the sewer systems?
I mean, just to know that they're that ninja-like, and if you're not paying attention, you won't see them. I know if I was trying to hide from somebody during the daytime, and I didn't want to, and I was in a suburban type setting, that's probably what I would do, is get into the sewer system and kind of be there till night came out and forage and do what you do, and then that way you got a roof over your head, instead of just making a ground nest. Why not make use of the available resources?
It's an interesting theory. I mean, you hear about them using caves all the time. So, I mean, that's why I was curious on what made you say that. But I can see it. I definitely could see it. You hear them around train tracks a lot. I've gotten a lot of reports off the air from engineers and conductors and that have seen them, or as they're going by, they've actually seen these things walking the tracks, and they'll step off the tracks when the train comes. I've had a few reports like that. So you're probably, your theory may not be too far off with that train track that you live next to.
Yeah, it was, I thought about that. I didn't think about it when I was a kid, but just being older, kind of thought about, why not at night? If I'm one of them and I'm deep off in the woods somewhere and I want to travel more quickly than me running or walking, why not jump on the back of a train or jump in between cars? And, I believe that they're very, have a lot of agility. So I believe that they would be able to jump on a moving train very easily.
Yeah, you could be right. One other question I want to ask you. You had mentioned the lights at your window. Do you think it was eye shine from one of these things up in a tree, or do you think...
I do believe it was eye shine from one or possibly, well, I didn't see. The way that I can describe what I saw multiple greenish yellow lights up in the corner of the window, and I didn't really think much of it. I thought it was like possibly a reflection or something. And then at one point in time, after I got older, I was like, I wonder if those were orbs that I was seeing, or what it could have been. And so I believe that, that they were up in the tree looking, because after the police came, I believe that I heard like some on the roof, like doing stuff on the top of the house. So
yeah, it's fascinating. It makes you wonder what was going on there. And I would imagine this would affect you throughout your life. Having this experience, it's a lot for adults to go through. I can't imagine being 12, 13 years old and going through this. I would imagine you think about it from time to time.
I'll think about it every time that I'm going somewhere. If I'm traveling somewhere and I have to go through anywhere that's primarily a wooded area, I'm hyper alert, and I've been asked to go on float trips with people and do all kind of fun outdoor stuff. I still love the outdoors, but I just don't participate in that frequency anymore, I guess you would say. And so I'll tell the people on the float trips, I'm not going out there. Well, why don't you want to come? I told one person what I saw, and they laughed at me. So after that, I probably didn't say too much anymore to any other people. But yeah, it'll make you. It's giving me PTSD, I believe. I mean, I can go back like maybe about 2 weeks ago. I had a very vivid dream where I was out somewhere. It was kind of wooded, but I was inside of a house, and I stepped off the porch. And as soon as I stepped off the porch, just I could hear like a step, and then I was being taken. You know, that's how it's affecting me. I remember the dreams that I had after it. You know, shortly, maybe days or after it, tearing up a house, trying to get into the house to get me.
Yeah, it always comes out one way or another. Well, I think anyone that went through what you went through would have a little PTSD. And it's like I say, Shawn, it's all fun and games until you run into one. And then you can go listen to all the podcasts you want. You can go watch all the TV shows you want. You can listen to people tell you their experiences. You can go out, maybe even hear a few howls out in the woods. But until you see one, you have no idea. And it does scare the crap out of you when you see them. I mean, I can't imagine that thing looking up at you and giving you that stink eye. You know, a lot of times people describe that as, I've had a lot of hunters and everyone else that's run into them. That same expression you were talking about where the nose is kind of scrunched and almost like it's going to scream at you, but it doesn't. And
Right.
That's what a lot of people say. So I would imagine it would have effect on you. You know, if it didn't, I would say you're not human. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that the whole cover up thing with the government is crazy, because these things are out there, and if they really want you, there's nothing that you can possibly do about it. I mean, you could probably try to shoot them. I don't know what caliber it would take to take it down. I'm not an expert hunter or anything, but if they want you, it reminds me of one of those old Tom and Jerry cartoons where the fleas are singing "Food Around the Corner." They're going to get you and take you and cart you away. And I don't know if they just eat specific parts of things or whatever, and leave it for the rest of the animals, or, you know, there wouldn't be too much that you can do about it. I just wonder, you know, I understand part of probably why the government might cover it up is because it could affect the forestry industry and some other things. But where I was, you know, all that stuff wasn't even going on. We're talking about suburbs, but on the edge of the suburbs, I mean, there might have been one housing development that was further out, but after that, there was nothing but woods. And in between the housing development that I was speaking about and where I lived, there were houses, but there was also a lot of woods around there. I used to ride my bike down the street, and I would make a right and kind of follow a curve around to the left and go straight for maybe half a mile. And I would be in a big giant field, and you would ride down this hill, and there would be people out there riding dirt bikes, jumping stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely out there. But I appreciate it, Shawn. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share it. I really enjoyed hearing your experience.
I enjoyed sharing it, and I appreciate you having me on. And it's been a way for me to vent and kind of take some of my power back, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's a good thing to talk about it. You know, it's good for the soul.
Very, very good indeed.
Thanks, Shawn. Well, I want to welcome Jeff to the show. Jeff, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Wes. It's an honor.
Yeah, no, the honor's mine. And I know you had 3 particular encounters you want to talk about tonight. Would you kind of start from the beginning, kind of walk us into the first one? What were you guys doing, and just kind of walk us into what happened?
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say, first off, I love your show. I love the whole style of it. People feel very comfortable talking to you, and that was one of the reasons I reached out to you as well. I think you got a good thing going, and obviously a lot of people are having a lot of experiences, and they're very comfortable going forward and speaking out with you on your show. So thank you for that. So for me, you know, I live here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm out in the forests and the mountains quite a bit. I'm very active. And I've had several just weird experiences. And so I've kind of boiled them down to the three that I'm about to mention tonight. So the first one basically happens right on the shoulder of Mount Hood. And we were up on the north side of Mount Hood, and my good friend and I were leading a group that goes around the whole mountain. So it's about 40 miles around the whole mountain, and we decided to break the trip up into two chunks with camping in between. So the first leg of the trek was about a 13-mile leg from the Timberline Lodge, going going counterclockwise to the Cloud Cap Campground, which is about 13 miles away. And so the thing about the Cloud Cap Campground, normally you can drive up there in the summertime. And this particular year, the road was closed off due to, I actually can't remember why it was closed. I think some trees fell across the road or something. So, so normally, it has a fair amount of people that are camping up there. It's a little higher up on the mountain. It's a beautiful spot. But this year it was empty because of the road closure. So my good friend, he decided that he and a couple helpers were going to go ahead and gather everybody's sleeping bags and tents and everything. And they were going to spend the whole day hiking everything up to this campground so that the campsite was waiting for us when we came around the mountain. So they got there a day or two early. They did all that. They hiked up, miles up, and with a lot of elevation gain to get up there. And they got up and they had the whole place to themselves. And so it was a beautiful night. And I think the three of them were kind of spread out around the campsite. And my close friend was lying there just without a tent. It was a beautiful, warm night, just looking up at the stars at probably about 3:00 in the morning, and he just heard huge footsteps walking through the brush, like two, biped. And I mean, they were big steps. They were not like it. He even said that it didn't sound like a person. And I asked him many times, you sure it wasn't like a bear or anything? And, like I said, he and I have had encounters with bears. We've had encounters with mountain lions, elk, many animals. And he knew, and he said it just walked towards him. And he sat up actually at one point and clicked on his headlamp, and he realized whatever was walking just stopped behind a big tree about 30 feet from him. And he just shut his light off and kind of laid back down and was paralyzed by fear. And he just knew whatever it was standing behind the tree, just being very silent and still. And, he just went from laying there looking up at the stars to hearing something coming across the brush, and then just stopping behind a tree and being completely silent. And he just said he was just so paralyzed by fear. He thought he was going to die that night. And when I got around the mountain with the crew the next afternoon, he, as soon as I got there, he pulled me aside and was like, "Oh, I got to tell you this crazy story that happened to me last night." And, he told me, and I could see it in his face and I could hear it in his voice, that he experienced something out of the ordinary. And so that was all that happened. He said he just fell back asleep eventually. And that was that. That was kind of the first experience that I was a little bit close to here up in the Northwest.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so did that kind of, at this point, did you believe, Jeff, in Sasquatch or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had just from, if you're an open-minded person and you do a fair amount of research online, or even just listening to your station, the amount of similarities of people experiencing all over the place, the parallels that are out there, it's just, it takes a very closed-minded person to say that it can't be. There's so much evidence. So yeah, I was a believer. And I've had other, instances where I've been out there and I've heard things, and I haven't had any visual contact yet, but many unexplainable things. Or friends of mine, I had a friend that she went camping with her son one night, and she came into work the next day, and she just said, "Oh, I heard this like rock. Somebody was pounding rock together all night." She's just out in the middle of nowhere again, up by Mount Hood, and I'm just thinking to myself, that's Sasquatch. And then, of course, you don't want to say that to them, because then you come off as a crazy person, right? Or they laugh it off.
Let me ask you, Jeff, and I'm glad you brought this up, because it comes on the show several times. On Friday night's show, I had a guy on who they were out having a good time. They were in Stubblefield in Texas, and this is like 1996, 1997. He's hanging out there with his buddies, or they're drinking, like most high school students. They're out there. I don't want to say most high school students, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's not outrageous to think they're out there drinking, but they're out there drinking, and these rocks start coming in, being thrown at everyone around the campfire. Rocks. And, in my mind, even if I was a kid, I would think there's something wrong here. I mean, is someone out in the woods really throwing rocks at us, or what the hell's going on here? And I mean, big rocks, like knocking out windshields and softball sized rocks. And, his mindset was, well, we decided with some crazy people out there throwing rocks at us. And I'm like, does that add up to anyone in the room?
No.
Like, does that make sense to anyone in the room? Like, if I came across a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire, the last thing I'd do is throw rocks at them, because they'd probably start shooting at me.
Right, exactly.
And that's what these guys did. They started shooting. So it's fascinating.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, no, they started shooting. They pulled out their guns and started shooting.
Oh yeah, I don't blame them.
And it just makes you stop. And even then, you stop and go, well, if you thought it was people, why did you start shooting? I mean, someone's throwing a rock at you and you're going to execute them. But I understand the mindset, when you're out there.
Maybe they're shooting up in the air or something. And, they were also a little, they were maybe drinking a little bit too much or something too. But if you just you brought up a good point too. If you just take the actual notion of just rock throwing alone, there's so many reports of people getting hit by rocks all over the place. Texas, Virginia, Washington, all over the globe. It's a common behavior, just as is tree peaking, or shaking trees, or throwing logs, whatever it is. There's just these parallels in all these different stories that it's either the greatest hoax in the history of, the world, or there's something out there that has this common behavior, right?
Yeah, it makes the most sense. I mean, it's funny when I look at the evidence now. Maybe it's because this is a soup I swim in. But, when I look at the evidence, I'm kind of lost at some people when they say, well, that couldn't be possible. It's like, well, how much have you looked into this? There's a lot of reports of these things, a lot. And there's a lot of evidence that they do exist. I guess it's frustrating for me. I wish more people would just take the time to look at it, as opposed to, I had this conversation with someone. I don't remember, maybe it was with you, Jeff, but I was talking about how 40 years ago, if you talked about aliens, everyone said, here's your tinfoil hat. Everyone thought you were crazy. Nowadays, if you ask someone if they think aliens are real, most people will say, yeah, they're probably real.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of a mindset change, you know what I mean?
It is. And, of course, we have made so many advances, as modern humans, and building skyscrapers and iPhones and whatnot. But I think it's very egotistical to think that we're the highest, on the food chain, or that we've got everything figured out. There's a lot of unexplained things out there. And, for this, where there is so much tangible, experiences and evidence out there, as even with, like UFOs and aliens too, there's a lot of evidence. And then you mention that to some people and they're just like, oh, you believe in that stuff? And it's just like, well, I could turn it around and say, oh, I'm not a religious person, but I could say, oh, you believe in those stories from the Bible, or you believe in those stories from the Quran, or, whatever it may be. Where's the evidence with that? Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And there's more evidence that Sasquatch exists as opposed to the Red Sea opening up, and
exactly.
So I'm with you, and that's kind of a different topic. I don't want to piss people off. I mean, that's more
totally. And I'm not offending anything. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people that religious or have faith, and a lot of the principles that work in religion. I try to follow as well. It's just I was just kind of making that comparison too.
And
millions and billions of people will believe in this, which is blind faith.
You're right.
But when you have something that actually has tangible evidence, it's
a good
people
point.
Are kind of closed off to that. They don't want.
It's a really good point. And a lot of the people who are generally closed off are the religious type. But that's a whole different show.
That is a different show. Yes.
I get where you're coming from though. And again, I'm more spiritual than I'm religious, but it's hard to argue what you just said. I mean, I consider myself, a pretty easygoing guy for the most part. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty easygoing, and, it takes a lot to really piss me off, but it's hard to argue what you just said. You're absolutely right. I want to talk about the second incident because it was a buddy of yours who was kind of a staunch non-believer. Tell us about that. What happened and what were you guys doing?
So this one was a little bit closer to home for me. So once again, we were up near the Mount Hood area, the Mount Hood National Forest, right off the Pacific Crest Trail, and pretty far back, away from any highways or anything like that. And we were in a tent, and we were actually volunteering for an event which we had to be up very early for. So we which we do every year, we just decided to camp right where we needed to be for this volunteer event. And so we needed to be up by like 4:45 in the morning to get ready. And the guy who I was sleeping in the tent with is like, and I had mentioned stuff in the past with him, and you kind of feel people out, and he was just this staunch non-believer in any of that stuff. And he was very outspoken and very, I guess, kind of abrasive about it, dropping F-bombs and and just very vehemently against the idea that it could be possible. Right. So that actually made it more believable that this happened, what I'm about to tell you. So I woke up at about 4:30 in the morning, and it was just starting to get light out, summertime, some of the longest days of the year, and he was wide awake. And when you look at somebody and that they've been awake for a while or they've not really slept, you can kind of tell. His eyes were wide, and it was just starting to get light out in the tent. He's like, and he said to me, have you heard this all night? And I said, no, what? He goes, somebody's been walking around the woods all night. And eventually it sounded like they realized that the tent was here, and they walked towards and they pushed over a tree. And I was like, no, but my first instinct was, that's Sasquatch. And I said that to him, and he goes, no, man, I think it was some effing kids. And I said, well, he said, I looked out multiple times throughout the night, shined his headlamp out, no lights, nothing. He couldn't see anything. But he was coming up with every excuse of what it was other than Sasquatch. But we actually went in the morning, saw the tree that got pushed over. I looked for some tracks around, but, I couldn't see anything. It was very dry and pine needles and stuff like that. But we did see the tree that came down. It wasn't a huge tree, but it was pretty close to the tent. I was close enough. It was probably 50 to 75 feet from the tent. I just find it very difficult to believe that a high school kid well, he said it was one person that he heard. So he said it was a high school kid that was probably trying to mess with us. I find it hard to believe that there was a high school kid way out in the middle of nowhere walking around without a light at 3:00 in the morning and pushed over a tree to try to scare us.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, when you really think about it, and a lot of people think that. I mean, I've had hunters on that think that, they go into that, and I guess it's normal. I guess I'm breaking balls here, but I guess it's normal. You would think, well, it must be a person, right? It must be someone out here messing with us. But on the other side of the coin, that's a good way to get shot. You go in there and start
Totally.
messing with someone's camp. You're walking around their camp all night.
Absolutely.
And you decide to push over a tree, even if it's a small tree a human can push over.
Right.
It's a great way to get shot. Yeah, even out here, and I know you're kind of my neighbor, and it's this as well as I do. We kind of live in a, and I'm not conservative or anything, so I hope no one takes offense to this, but kind of a liberal area. And but having said that, you get out there in those woods, man, and someone will put a bullet in you. You start messing
you get
around.
outside the urban areas.
Absolutely.
And, absolutely. You're right. But again, going back to this notion of like the rock throwing, right? You look at the tree pushing down trees, right? You look down. This is common behavior. These are stories I've heard time and time again on your show and on many other, YouTube videos or podcasts, right? You hear about pushing over trees. You hear, I've seen videos of trees coming down, right? It's just common behavior. So it's not out of the ordinary to think like, oh, there's rock throws or there's trees getting pushed down or there's hiding behind trees. These are common behaviors. And, I'm starting to get a little bit closer to some of these experiences. And so I don't know. That's kind of where I'm, it's kind of like this double-edged sword. It's like I go out to the wilderness a lot and I know that there's something else out there, but it's part of my therapy, I guess you could say too. And it's part of my passion and what I love to do. So it's not like I'm going to just not go out there anymore, but I do realize that I keep putting myself out in these situations and it's, things are happening. And I hear a lot of stories, where people have these experiences where they don't go as well as they've gone for me. And, they see things and it changes them forever. And maybe they get traumatized or maybe they just have bad experiences. And so I'm a little bit kind of worried about that sometimes too. It's always in the back of my mind. And, if I take my family out camping and things like that, those are always kind of in the back of my mind. And again, I don't really voice those because again, it's just like you sound crazy. You sound like a crazy person.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, the thing with this subject is the thing is that let's take a grizzly bear, for example. And I want to get to your Utah encounter, so forgive me, but,
no worries.
Let's think of a grizzly bear, for example. 99% of the time, you know what you're up against. You know how it's going to react. You know what to do in a situation. If you're attacked, grizzly bear, you're going to play dead. Black bear, you're going to fight for your life. But I mean, you know what you're up against. And you're probably going to run into that mentality if you run into a grizzly bear. With Sasquatch is so odd. Because very unpredictable, man, because it's almost, and I'm not saying they're human, but it's almost kind of like dealing with humans. You might run into Jeff.
That's a really good point.
He's a nice guy. He's yourself. You're a nice guy. You talk nice to everyone, and you're an easygoing guy. And then you run into like Wes, and all of a sudden he's a monster for no reason, and there's no rhyme or reason behind it. You're just dealing with a completely different entity. And that's the part, like it walking around the camp all night, then deciding to push over a tree. You just never quite know what you're going to run into with these things. You don't know what type of mood it's in. You don't know
exactly. That's a really good point. I mean, we all have I have days where I'm in a bad mood or, I've had bad times where I've snapped at people, right? I mean, we're human, right? And that's a really good point to bring up,
And I don't know if it was you, Jeff, or not that said it to me the other day. Someone said it to me. They said, some days you might run into someone and they cut you off on the freeway, for example. And, it's no big deal. You let it go. And then some days someone cuts you off, man, and you're ready to kill them. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. If they'd have caught you the day before, you were cool with it.
Right.
You'd have just gone with the flow. And that's kind of the way Sasquatch is. It's kind of, there's no real rule book for, I think if I ran across one, I would hope I would, it's kind of arrogance talking, but I think I would know what to do now. I say that I'll probably end up pissing my pants like everyone else the second time around, but
right. Well, and if they are human-like too, I mean, just like every human has their own personality, right?
Right.
I mean, you have humans that are very kind, and you have humans that are scary. You wouldn't want to see in a dark alley, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because you just never quite know what you're going to get. And I cringe when I have people on the show and they're like, "Oh, my first encounter is friendly. I go out there with flowers and."
Yeah, I've heard stories like that too, and that worries me. They're still a wild animal. I don't care if you're, raise a wolf up or a bear, that it can turn on you sometimes. And
very much so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just never know. You never know what you're going to get with these things. I think most of the time I would tell people to treat it the same way you would a grizzly bear. Back off of it slowly. Don't make any quick movements and just try and leave the area. And whether it's aggressive or not, it's irrelevant. Just try and leave the area as quickly as you can. Mm-hmm. But, you just, I don't know how we got off on this tangent, but you're right. You just never know what creatures you're going to deal with. The guy I had on last Sunday had a very different encounter with him than I did. My encounter was very different than his encounter. But, does that not validate his encounter? No. But I didn't mean to go off on the tangent. Tell us about Utah. Okay. Tell us about the Utah incident.
So this third experience that I wanted to share happened out in the Wasatch Mountain Range of Utah. And I was supporting a friend who was, doing this event where we had to trek up through these mountains in the middle of the night. And we were heading over this mountain pass. It was about 11,000 feet. And we were, I don't know, it was dark. So I want to say it was about 11 p.m. It was starting to get windy and cold, and we both had our headlamps on. And we were walking up this huge climb, and we're from sea level basically. So we're out there just kind of getting our butts kicked a little bit at 11,000 feet. And I look down on the trail, single track, and there's just a pool of blood. Like, it seemed like a lot. And I just thought, that's weird. That can't come from a person, because they would, I don't know, it just seemed like. So anyway, I just felt weird looking around. We both kind of looked around, and he just kept on going. And I looked over to the right, and something caught my eye. And it was about, I'd say, 100 feet off the trail. I caught a glimpse of something kind of white-ish, and I ran, kind of tentatively walked over, and I realized it was a buck, a big buck with the horns and everything, with the antlers, and it didn't have any like bullet holes that I could see, or any arrows. I don't think it was hunting season. It was the night. And
so
let's see, what time of year was it? Let me see. It was in September, I believe.
And the buck is dead, correct?
The buck was dead.
Okay.
But it was a fresh kill. But I didn't see any. I don't see any how it would die, unless it was on the side that it was laying on. So it was just very strange, and the fact that nothing had gotten to it yet. It didn't smell. It just seemed like, and it was the pool of blood. It just didn't. And then like I've heard on your show, and I've heard many other stories about this feeling of being watched. I felt that a little bit when I was walking away from that. I felt like I was being watched a little bit. And then this totally blew my mind, and I didn't share this with anybody. I shared it with my good friend who, from the first story, who was laying there looking at the stars, and the Sasquatch came up and hid behind the tree. I shared this with him.
Yeah.
Because I confide in him, and he's kind of had that situation, and so I told him that I looked over off the trail, a little up the trail, and I saw a tree structure, all these thin trees kind of placed up in a kind of almost like a teepee fashion, and the grass was all trampled down around the base of the tree. And it was like, definitely somebody did this. I don't know if it was a human or not, but it seemed like the classic tree structures that you see when you do a little Sasquatch research online on YouTube. Very similar. And it was definitely somebody put that up there. And it was right near where the deer happened, and I'm just like, I wonder there was a correlation there. I wonder. I don't know if they use these for, maybe they use them for, these are the alleyways that the deer come through, or as a roadmap, like this is where the kill is, or
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I'm trying to think of like maybe why, but that was the weird Utah experience, and and since looking into it, I've heard many experiences out in Utah in the Wasatch Mountain range, and that area seems like a very hot spot as well.
Was the deer, was the neck broke or anything, or was it just laying there?
It didn't appear to me to have a broken neck. And I didn't in the moment I wasn't thinking Sasquatch. It wasn't until after I saw the tree structure and after I kind of put it all together about how I was feeling kind of weird, hiking up that mountain, and then I saw the tree structure, and then I kind of put it all together after the fact of like, I wonder if we just happened to like run one off or something. It just killed it.
Yeah, it's hard to say, especially the feeling of being watched. The my guest on it didn't go on the air, but Steven was talking about that. Shot this big buck, and he needed help getting it out of there. And they went out there, found the blood trail, and then all of a sudden the blood trail just stopped. And he said this thing was bleeding like crazy. And then all of a sudden it just stopped, and there was no deer, there was no nothing. It's like it just got lifted up off the planet and was taken away. And, they're looking at it and they're like, man, what, so it makes you wonder sometimes when you find stuff like this and you find the tree structure. The tree structure is really starting to fascinate me a little bit, because there's some of them I found where it's hard to rule out a human doing it. Yeah. It's very hard to rule out a human. But there's other ones to where it doesn't make any sense that a human would have the strength, or some of the branches you see broke, because nothing's ever sawed off. If you ever look,
that's exactly how it was. That's how. And this one a human could have built, but I'm just like, why would somebody go through all this trouble to weave all these trees together? It just seems weird. I mean, if somebody's trying to mess with you, maybe, I guess, but that's always a slight chance, I guess. But
yeah, no, I hear you. And like I said, if something doesn't make sense, usually that's something you need to investigate a little bit. And some of these tree structures, I don't know what to think about them, and I don't really understand the purpose behind some of them. Because if you look at them, and I don't know if this is what you noticed when you saw it, but if you look at a lot of them, I don't even know if a Sasquatch would fit in half of them.
Right.
And so
that's kind of what got me thinking about maybe they're not used, solely for, shelter or protection. More, maybe it's some sort of, roadmap to the forest type of thing, because I do believe that, these beings are much more in tune with the wilderness, obviously, than us dull senses, the dull senses that we have as humans, especially the modern day humans. I mean, even people that spend a lot of time out in the wilderness, there's so much going on that we just miss with our dull senses of sight, hearing, smell. And, you got a being like Sasquatch that has heightened sensory receptors that can see at night, that are nocturnal, that can smell, maybe they have some sort of telepathic, I don't know, maybe they can tell each other the way that these trees are, put together, that this means something. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's not hard to fool a human. Even your best hunter, if you sit them down, get a few drinks in them, even your best hunter will admit that, you would never see anything in the forest unless it moved. If a deer is standing still, 9 times out of 10, even your best hunter will not see it. We're trained,
right?
Not trained, but I think we're programmed. It's on our DNA. We look for movement. We look for things moving in the forest. And if something's sitting still, 9 times out of 10, we'll just pass by it. We'll just look past it. We won't even look at it,
Right. But I'm sure I've probably gone past, Sasquatch or mountain lions, and mountain lions and stuff, and not even realized it.
Yeah, you probably have, especially in the country, part of the country you and I live in. You probably have passed.
I also, think about the Native Americans who were very much in tune with nature and the animals, and back before, I guess, the white man came here, and and you look at all their stories and folklore, and they always kind of warned, like, oh, these are don't you know don't mess with these people, don't mess with this tribe, the scary man of the mountains, or the whatever the stories are, they've always warned, like, stay away.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the next point, is like, I know a lot of people are going out there and trying to find them, and that's their business. But for me personally, I don't want to go out looking for them. That's just my own personal opinion on it.
Well, let me ask you. I know you've had limited experience with them. What do you think Sasquatch is?
I mean, that's the question that I've heard it asked a lot on your show, and I feel like it's some sort of hominid, or hybrid or combination of human and animal that, like I said, it has these sensory receptors that are almost like sonar like, that they can sense things. They can sense people coming from far away. They can sense cameras, maybe, I don't know, but it seems like there's some kind of, I don't know, there's definitely different schools of thought on it. I'm not as experienced as some of you guys and some of the people on the show, so I don't know if I can really speak to it, but I feel like they're very human-like in some ways, but they're also very animal-like in some ways.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you on that. I think there's something different about them. And
there's something different about them. And the scientists always want to say, well, they're a descendant of Gigantopithecus, and I don't think it's that cut and dry.
I don't think that it is either. And I think the longer you're involved in this topic, I think the more you start to realize there's something else going on here. Something doesn't feel right. Something isn't right about this. A lot of people don't look at it that way, and that's okay.
That's true. Exactly. Yeah. Everybody's got their right to have their opinion on things.
Absolutely.
You can do whatever you want. If you want to go out there and give it apples and try to find it and take pictures of it, that's fine. Just be careful. Like you always say, you warn people, like, these are, it's not like a Harry and the Hendersons or something you're messing with out there. That the Native Americans warned about it. People disappear out there all the time. It's just, there's some scary stories out there, and for somebody that goes out to the mountains a lot, out to the deep wilderness a lot, I almost kind of want to just go with that intention of, like, ignorance is bliss. And if I'm having these, like, little experiences here and there where I'm not looking for them, that's fine. But keeping my distance, I guess. I don't know, but
yeah.
I appreciate you, kind of letting me vent a little bit, because I actually don't think I've ever really talked this much about it to somebody.
Yeah.
But you guys get it, and the people that listen to your show get it as well, and you've created a nice kind of forum for that.
Well, like I said, I appreciate you coming on and sharing the encounter very much. I know we're neighbors, man. We should go get a beer sometime, and I'll drag Woody out. We'll go up to Bumping Lake and see what we can find.
Oh man, I don't know about that. But,
I'll leave my younger brother out of it. He likes to point guns at people, so we'll leave him home. But yeah, brother, I appreciate it, man. We'll have to stay in touch. I'd love to go out if you ever want to go out, and
absolutely,
or go get a beer or something, man. You're right across the river.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, and I'm going to continue listening to the show and supporting you guys. So thanks for all that you do.